Hi, I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and welcome to How to Help Your Client Get Over an Identity Crisis. 3 strategies to help your client get a sense of who they really are. Now, just a few years before he died, that great individualist Oscar Wilde wrote in a letter from jail, "Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives a mimicry. Their passions a quotation." Some people never seem troubled by such questions as, "Who am I?" But for some people, gaining a sense of identity is a real struggle, maybe even a lifelong struggle. One client told me that he often felt like an alien visiting Earth, always on the outside looking in, as he put it. So at a basic level, your personal identity is your inner sense of who you are. It comes from our unique mix of experiences, values, and personality traits, which shape how we think, act, and relate to the world and the people in it. Identity is essentially our answer to the questions, who am I? What's my purpose? But why does it seem so important to want a clear identity anyway? Even as young children, once we develop so-called theory of mind, which is the intuitive grasp of the idea that other people are different to us, with their own ideas and perspectives and fears and desires, they are not us, they see things differently, we can become preoccupied with developing our own sense of identity in relation to other people, but also as separate or distinct from them. So identity is the way we feel we are identified, seen by others, but also seen by ourselves. Where do I fit into all of this? How do I seem to others? What's my status? Where is my true home? This search for identity can lead us along many paths. If people form their identity around a deficit or just one aspect of themselves, they may come to label themselves as a victim or fundamentally faulty in some way, and their whole identity can be established around that. What's more, this need to belong to some tribe, be defined in some way, often goes into overdrive during adolescence. Traditionally, a young person might form their identity around a sense of rebellion from the adult world. Ironically, they might do this in quite a conformist way. They may join a recognizable group, so teddy boys, that's going back a bit, goths, punks, nerds, mods, rockers, new romantics, and I'm sure groups I'm far too old to even know about, have all fulfilled that purpose. Their identity then becomes being a member of a type. Whilst you're struggling to find a sense of identity, you can sort of borrow an identity from a type or a stereotype, and that can work as a sort of holding pattern, a holding place, until they hopefully come to a more solid sense of individualistic identity. So when we wear the uniform of a ready-made group, we find a holding place identity. For some, political views may fill this role, but most of us move on eventually as we enter adulthood. The punk with a safety pin through their nose might eventually exchange that uniform for a suit and tie, which is another type of uniform. And so the world turns. And of course, things often travel to their logical conclusion. More recently, sexual or gender identity have been the means by which some young people seek to both define themselves and be defined by other people. Some young people have been encouraged to identify as animals or clouds or other non-human entities. So we've gone kind of full circle. From a Victorian sense, we might even say from a pre-1950s sense, that young people were basically smaller adults. What people can form their sense of identity around now has become a hugely amount broader. While in bygone years believing yourself to be a cloud or a cat or a 12-year-old girl when previously you were widely considered to be a 40-year-old male, may have precipitated a stay in a psychiatric facility. Yet currently, such self-identifications are, for some children and adults, tolerated, accepted, or even encouraged by the adult world. Some of this will be genuine dysmorphia, some will be social contagion, and it may need time to disentangle the two. In the 70s, a parent may have been openly derisive and disappointed or worried if their teenage son grew his hair long, wore flared trousers, and listened to the kind of noise that was anathema to the World War II generation. Whereas now, in fact, in many Western cultures, not accepting the reality of someone's stated identity is somewhat taboo. In some countries, visits from police and doxing and internet mobbing might result if we openly refuse to accept what people think and say about their identity. Part of this new openness to identity derives from the idea that all truth is arbitrary. All truth is in the eye of the beholder, and there is in fact no objective truth other than, presumably, the truth that there is no objective truth. It's not acceptable not to accept the identity of others. So, not being free to be oneself and to choose an identity, even one that may be non-human, isn't such an issue as it once was, say back in the buckled-down 1940s. The pendulum swings from one extreme to another. And yet this new norm to accept and encourage all and every identity to a point that would have seemed literally insane to earlier generations doesn't seem to be making young people any happier. And it does seem that some people struggle with identity more than others. Children and adults on the autistic spectrum may struggle with identity more than most because of a struggle to understand other people. Without a strong understanding of people in general, it can be hard to understand ourselves in particular. A strong sense of self as separate from others may not come naturally. It may feel impossible to imagine that other people genuinely have different perspectives. Those with a more rules-bound psychology might choose jobs in which identity is automatically and clearly conferred and defined for them. They may join the police or armed forces or clergy and wear a uniform which clearly marks them out as having this or that set identity and status. At last, they have a clearly defined self, or at least a self that is recognizable to other people. And of course, that's not to say that everyone who enters these types of professions does so because of identity issues, just that some people might enter these professions because of these professions conferring a clear sense of identity. People with borderline personality disorder may also suffer with an impaired sense of identity. They may on occasion feel themselves to not exist or to be nothing, especially when relationships end. They may purely define themselves through relationships. So those on the autistic spectrum or with borderline personality disorder, and many teenagers, may all struggle with forming a coherent sense of identity. These struggles may have worsened with the fading of traditional roles and careers. How many people tell you what job they do and you're still left wondering what on earth they actually do? But do these holding place identities really fulfill those who adopt them? Now, it can be easy to borrow an identity from a preformed menu of options, but that identity, once adopted, may not really satisfy us for long, as it was, after all, created by someone else. It's something we can seem to be, but it may start to feel empty after a while. After all, a punk rocker is simply a type. Where is the individuality, the uniqueness, the person behind the label and uniform? Which leads us to the fundamental question. Inscribed on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi in Greece is the legend, "Know thyself." And indeed, we do need to know ourselves to understand what we think and what we want, how we work, and even if we grow wise, what we might need. Living in the wrong marriage, working in the wrong job, and not meeting our fundamental emotional needs in balance can corrode our sense of who we really are, because we're not living the right kind of life for us. We're living a lie. And when that happens, we can all start to struggle with a sense of identity, like a round peg in a square hole, or the swan who was seen and felt herself to be ugly because she wasn't a duckling. She was, after all, a swan. For some, as they grow older, a sense of identity can grow stronger and more definite. Such people become truly confident and may seem to have what others call presence. If you feel secure in your sense of self, in who you are, then it won't matter so much if others see you in the same light or not. A strong sense of personal identity makes us immune to the way others identify us. If they get us wrong, we don't care. When someone asks, "Who am I?" it's more than just a passing thought. It's a deep call for clarity, a need to understand where they fit in the world. Whether your client is navigating adolescence or the autistic spectrum or borderline personality disorder, or a sense of having been born into the wrong body or species, or even just being stuck in the wrong job or relationship, a confused identity can make everyday life feel overwhelming. We as practitioners need to be open-minded, not to too quickly assign some identity or other onto the client, or even to too readily affirm some identity that they aren't sure about themselves, that other people have assigned them with. A sense of identity can become fixed onto a person, and like a tattoo of the psyche, can be hard to remove, which, if it's a limiting identity, might be a problem. Gentle exploration is what's needed. Socratic questioning can be very useful with our identity-confused clients, in which we simply ask them to ponder questions calmly and from different perspectives. But anyway, here are 3 more specific, straightforward strategies to help your client discover who they truly are. So strategy 1, discover and explore their core values. At the heart of a solid identity lie your core values. These are the beliefs that drive decisions and actions that you feel are important. When clients know what they truly value, not what they think they're supposed to value or other people have told them to value, but what they really value, they can filter out external noise and make choices that resonate with their inner truth. If you know what you're really about, what you value, whether it's kindness or clear and independent thinking, hard work, personal responsibility, or decency and honesty, then remembering and reflecting on those core values regularly can help you resist blind groupthink. Understanding the seductive power of groupthink can also help you resist it. Okay, so reflect on peak moments. Ask your client to think back on times when they felt most alive or proud. What values were at play? Can you discuss those values with them? Bring them out. Okay. You could encourage them to journal. Encourage your client to have regular writing sessions where they list what matters to them most. One client called Josh felt that since he'd gone to college, he'd lost himself. Regular journaling as to what was important to him individually actually helped him start to live those values more day to day, with the result that his self-esteem began to rise, along with his self-confidence. We could use mindful exploration. So practices like guided meditation or hypnotherapy can help peel away layers of societal expectations to reveal deep-seated values. You could help your client hypnotically recall times in which they were living their values, not as ideas, but as realities. Really getting them to feel what it feels like to be themselves, to be an individual, to know who they are. Another strategy, break free from musterbation and shouldmania. So musterbation and shouldmania are the habits of forcing ourselves into roles dictated by external standards. These internal pressures often, or external pressures I should say, often lead clients to adopt identities that feel borrowed and ultimately unfulfilling. And of course we all need to conform to some extent and to some external expectations. You know, me shouting and screaming at your wedding ceremony may be me doing me, but it wouldn't be great for you. But too much conforming can lead to a diminishment, a squeezing out of a sense of unique self. So how can we tackle this common trap? We can help our clients challenge self-talk, train your client to notice when they say internally or otherwise, I should or I must, and replace these with words like, I choose to. Okay, I choose to do this. I choose. Self-compassion. Teach them to treat themselves with the kindness they would offer a friend. You could reframe expectations, help your client question whether their current goals, roles, and even ideas are genuinely theirs, or just the result of external pressures and groupthink, and a desperate need to change what's wrong in their lives without first looking at other options. Ultimately, many of the more superficial roles we adopt in life are temporary. They may seem to define us for a while, but are roles we can move on from. It can be useful to see the human being behind other people's roles too, their personas. What is the reality behind that mask, that persona? The policeman is a person, so too even is the politician. What's going on behind this artificiality? Strategy 3, build an authentic, evolving identity. So as I've mentioned, many people adopt identities from a ready-made menu of options, whether it's a trendy social group or a respected profession or a countercultural group. While these labels can provide comfort, they may also leave your client feeling empty if they don't align with who they are in their core uniqueness. When they begin to grow out of that label, that persona, it might start to feel constrictive, just as when your feet start to grow, your shoes start to squeeze. Explore different facets, encourage creative exercises such as storytelling or art or role-playing. These methods let your client experiment with parts of themselves that may have been overlooked. I asked one client to write a story of his ideal future, and he was to let his imagination run wild. He related that doing this had let him view himself in a much bigger way. So embrace fluidity. Remind your client that identity isn't fixed, it evolves over time. The young woman becomes the middle-aged woman, becomes the old woman. She's still the same person, but facets of her being change. Embracing change can lead to a richer, more authentic self. When clients self-restrict, they may use phrases such as, I'm not the type of person who could, or I could never do that. We can help such clients develop a growth mindset. What do you need to learn to become the kind of person that can do that? So practical tools can be considered as well. The Who Am I worksheet that I provide on my website can be useful for many practitioners, I think, in working with their client to explore their identities. Helping a client navigate an identity crisis is about more than finding a label. It's about crafting a life that feels genuine from the inside out, not one that simply mimics what everyone else is doing. By focusing on core values, challenging the demands of should, and building an authentic identity, you empower your client to set out from the shadows of borrowed roles, to leave that behind. Remember, identity isn't static. It's a journey of self-discovery. The identity of the acorn is also in becoming the oak tree, full of twists and turns, but adventure, with clear guidance and honest exploration.